Hello, everybody. Good afternoon, and welcome to this self-knowledge course. Today, we're going to be, as you can see here, studying conference number 34 out of 50 conferences of this self-knowledge course. Okay, a course that gives us the tools to achieve self-realization of our own inner being. A course that gives us the tools to develop all the virtues, faculties, and powers latent in our interior. This course, remember, that is totally free and, free access. Here in the description of this video, you're going to be finding the access link to the WhatsApp group, also to the Telegram group. Also, you're going to be finding the link to the YouTube channel in which we have all the conferences. Okay, we are studying, we've been studying along the course. Through the WhatsApp group, you can communicate directly with the administrators, and you can ask anything you want to know, anything you want to clear out about this course. But if you have any question about this topic, the topic we are going to be studying today, the permanent center of gravity, you can leave it down there in the comment section down below, and we're going to be very happy to answer any question you may have or to clear out any doubt you may have regarding this topic. And let's start with today's lecture. The objective of this conference is that we understand the importance of dedicating the entirety of our existence to our inner work and how we can achieve the continuity of purposes. So let's start by learning what a center of gravity is. A center of gravity is a point through which the force of gravity acts on a system or object. If we look to our solar system, we will realize how the sun exerts a gravitational force on the planets that revolve around it. Even our planet Earth has its center of gravity, and this pulls objects towards it, including us. If we make this relation respecting to ourselves, we will realize which our center of gravity is, identifying around which things our existence revolves, and we will realize that it is around our personality. Since everything we do is done to fit that personality that has us so fascinated. Work, family, profession, friends, partner, our likes and dislikes, and so on. What we will learn in this conference is how, through the continuity of purposes, we're going to be able to transfer the center of gravity from the personality to the consciousness. Okay, the continuity of purposes leads us to set a goal and have the perseverance until we reach it. The continuity of purposes is the only thing that can lead us to fulfill any goals, specifically these transcendental goals, such as the intimate self-realization of our being. However, if there is no true individuality, it is impossible to have continuity of purposes. If the psychological individual does not exist, if many people live within each one of us, if there is no responsible subject, it would be absurd to demand continuity of purpose from someone. We will know that many people live inside a person, inside us. Then the full sense of responsibility doesn't really exist in us. What determined I or psychological defect affirms in a given moment cannot take on any seriousness due to the concrete fact that any other I or psychological defect or ego, as we want to call it, can affirm the exact opposite at any other moment. The serious thing about all this is that many people believe they have a sense of moral responsibility, and they deceive themselves by claiming to always be the same. Okay, many people comes to this knowledge and even swear to devote their entire existence to these studies. However, the idol does not last long. Any day, due to such and such a fair or unfair, simple or complicated reason, the person retires from this knowledge. So he quits his job, internal job, and even joins any other mystical organization and thinks that things are going to be better now. All this coming and going, all this incessant change of schools, sects, religions is due to the multiplicity of eyes or psychological defects that within us fight among themselves for their own supremacy. Okay, since each eye has its own criteria, its own mind, its own ideas, this change of opinion is just normal. This constant fluttering from organization to organization, from ideal to ideal, etc. Well, the person in himself is nothing more than a machine that sometimes serves as a vehicle for one eye, for one ego, or another. Some mystical eyes deceive themselves. After abandoning this or that sect, they resolve believing themselves to be gods. They shine like will-o'-the-wisp lights and finally disappear. There are people who for a moment look at the esoteric work, and then at the moment when another eye intervenes, they well, they are going to be, they abandon, no? They abandon these studies and let themselves be swallowed up by life. Obviously, if we doesn't fight against life, it will devour us. And there are few aspirants who truly don't allow themselves to be swallowed by life, okay? Existing within us, the multiplicity of eyes, the permanent center of gravity cannot exist. It is just normal that not all persons self-realize. We will know that the intimate self-realization of the being demands continuity of purposes, and since it is very difficult to find someone who has a permanent center of gravity, then it is not strange that it is very rare the person who reaches deep inner self-realization. It is strange that someone doesn't abandon work and reach the goal. Something very important that we should know is about the sun experiment. The sacred absolute sun, universal Christ, or God, as some of us call it, is doing a very complicated and terribly difficult laboratory experiment. We may call it like that. Within the intellectual animal, mistakenly called men, us, there are germs that properly develop can become us, solar men, can turn us into solar men. These germs are found in our sexual gonads. It is that sexual creative energy that, when it germinates, leads us to create ourselves internally and to become solar men. However, it is worth clarifying that it is not certain that these germs develop in everybody. No, it is normal that they degenerate and lose, unfortunately, ending the possibility of achieving self-realization. In any case, the germs to convert us into solar men need an adequate environment, since it is well known that the seed in a sterile environment does not germinate. In order for the real seed of men deposited in our sexual glands to germinate, a normal physical body is needed, specifically that the mind, the spine, and the sexual apparatus are in optimal conditions. Also, we'll need an objective knowledge focused on the practice of the three factors for the revolution of consciousness and continuity of purpose. If the scientists continue doing tests with the glands of internal secretion, any possibility of development of the mentioned germs could be lost, okay, as we are doing today, as the scientists are doing today. Although it may seem incredible, but we should know that ants already went through a similar process in the remote archaic past of our planet Earth. One is filled with well, it's very surprising, no? When contemplating the perfection of a palace of ants. There is no doubt that the order established in any anthill, well, is formidable. These ants, in times not remotely suspected by the world's greatest historians, were a human race that created a very powerful socialist civilization. Then the dictators of that family eliminated the various religious sects and free will, since all these took away their power and they needed to be totalitarian in the most serious sense. Having eliminated individual initiative and religious rights, the intellectual animal plunged down the path of involution and degeneration. To all the above, scientific experiments were added, transplants of organs, glands, tests with hormones, etc., etc. The result of that was the gradual shrinking and morphology alteration of those humans organisms until they finally became the ants we know today. All that civilization, all those movements related to the established social order became mechanical and were inherited from father to son. Today, one is filled with astonishment when seeing an anthill, but we cannot help but lament its lack of intelligence. If we don't work on ourselves, we regress and degenerate frightfully. The experiment that the sun is doing in the laboratory of nature, certainly, besides being difficult, has given very few results. Creating solar men is only possible when there is true cooperation in each one of us. The creation of the solar man is not possible if we don't first establish a permanent center of gravity within ourselves. And how could we have continuity of purposes if we don't establish the center of gravity in our consciousness? Any race created by the sun certainly has no other objective in nature than to serve the interest of this creation and the solar experiment. Okay, if the race does not serve to that purpose, the sun loses all interest in such a race, and it is in fact doomed to destruction and involution. Each one of the races that have existed on the face of the earth, well, in the universe, but we're talking about this planet, has served for the solar experiment. From each race, the sun has achieved some triumphs, reaping small groups of solar men. When a race has borne its fruits, it progressively disappears, falling into involution, as in the case of ants. Yes, in the case of ants, as I was mentioning before. It has been believed that man has evolved from monkeys. This is another case. However, the monkeys were another race of man that degenerated. It is also the case that the race disappears violently through great catastrophes, such as the case of the Atlantean race, which perished through a great flood. The creation of solar man is possible when we fight for independence from the lunar forces. There is no doubt that all these eyes or psychological defects that we carry in our psyche are of an exclusively lunar type. In no way would it be possible to free ourselves from the lunar force if we didn't previously establish in us a permanent center of gravity. How could we dissolve the totality of the pluralized ego, I, if we don't have the continuity of purposes? How could we have continuity of purpose without having established previously in our psyche a permanent center of gravity? Since the current race, instead of becoming independent from lunar influence, has lost all interest in solar intelligence, unquestionably has condemned itself to involution and degeneration. It is not possible for the true man to arise through evolutionary mechanics. We all know that evolution and its twin sister involution are just two laws that constitute the mechanical axis of all nature. We evolve up to a certain perfectly defined point, and then comes the involutionary process. Every rise is followed by a fall, and vice versa. We are exclusively machines controlled by different eyes. We serve to the economy of nature. We don't have a defined individuality as many pseudo-esotericists and pseudo-occultists mistakenly suppose. We need to change with maximum urgency so that the germs of man give their fruits. Only by working on ourselves with true continuity of purpose and complete sense of moral responsibility can we become solar men. This implies consecrating the entirety of our existence to esoteric work on ourselves. Those who hope to reach the solar state through the mechanics of evolution deceive themselves, and in fact condemn themselves to involutionary degeneration. In the esoteric work, we cannot afford the luxury of versatility. Those who have vain ideas, those who today work on their psyche and tomorrow let themselves be swallowed up by life, those who seek evasions, justifications to abandon esoteric work degenerate or involute. Some mistakenly leave everything for tomorrow while they improve their economic situation without taking into account that the solar experiment is something very different from their personal criteria and their well-known projects. It is not easy to become a solar man when we carry the moon within us, and I mean with this the ego. Well, Earth has two moons. The second of these is called Lilith and lies a little more distant than the white moon called Nahemat. Astronomers usually see Lilith as a lentil since it is very small. Well, that is the black moon. The most perverse forces of the ego come to earth from Lilith with subhuman and bestial psychological results. Okay, I mean the crimes of the red press, for example, the most monstrous murders in history, the most unsuspected crimes, etc., are due to the vibratory waves of Lilith. The double lunar influence represented in the human being through the ego that carries within him makes us a true failure. If we do not seek the urgency, if we do not see, the urgency of giving our entire existence to work on ourselves, with the purpose of freeing ourselves from the double lunar force, we will end up swallowed by the moon, involuting, the ego, degenerating more and more within ourselves. Certain states that we could well describe as unconscious and subconscious, okay? The serious thing about all this is that we don't have true individuality. If we had a permanent center of gravity, we would really work seriously until we achieve the solar state. Fascinating attractions that in fact often makes almost impossible to understand the urgency of the esoteric work, okay? However, the small margin we have of free will and this knowledge oriented towards practical work could serve as a basis for our noble purposes related to the solar experiment. The vain mind doesn't understand that we are what we are saying here. Well, it listens this chapter and later forgets it. Then comes another book and another Well, and in the end, we end up joining any institution that sells us a passport to heaven, that speaks to us in a more optimistic way, that assures us comforts in the hereafter. This is how people are mere puppets controlled by invisible strings, mechanical dolls with vain ideas and no continuity of purpose. Okay? At this point, we must ask ourselves and answer ourselves seriously and sincerely if we are really willing to dedicate our entire existence to esoteric work on ourselves and make a decision to really commit ourselves to this work. Decision that will take us, or that will require us to sacrifice more and more the things of our personality and dedicate more time to the things of consciousness. For this, the first thing we must do is to identify what our current center is, and we do this by identifying what things and in what proportion we dedicate time to them. Okay, we can observe our day and what time we spend sleeping, what time we spend working, what time we spend on leisure, family, the couple, household activities, etc. The next thing we'll do is start taking time away from those things, and we'll start giving it to work to awaken our consciousness. We must include to work the work, of course, with the three factors for the revolution of consciousness that are the base. Okay, this is the first. The psychological death, the spiritual birth, and the sacrifice for humanity, as well as other practices that are taught in this course, such as meditation, dervishes, the transmutation of cosmic forces, the mantralization of the vowel O, the practice of watching and praying, the astral unfolding, and the mental unfolding, among others. The time must come when the personality only will have the time strictly necessary, while our inner work monopolizes most of our time. It is important that we also know that the urgency of working within ourselves is closely related to the solar experiment, since this race is reaching its maximum degeneration and entering involution. Therefore, we don't have so much time to do this self-realization work. We must make double efforts to advance as quickly as possible. Okay? And well, this has been today's conference. Thank you very much for watching us. Any doubt, remember, any doubt you may have or question can be left in the comments. And we invite you to the next conference next Thursday, entitled Explanation about Family and Attachments, where we will learn the types of families that exist and what their functions are, and how we can work those attachments that prevent us from advancing on our inner work. So thank you very much, and until next time.